welcome to Make Your Own Fun. I'm here with filmmaker James Storm. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I know our mutual friend Crystal Lane has been trying to make the connections happen, and I'm just so glad you're here. And first of all, how the hell are you doing?
I am doing wonderful on this freezing February morning. It actually, we got blasted with snow last night, so I'm nice and cozy in my studio, ready to talk film. I got nowhere else to be today.
Oh, you got some snow? Okay, yeah, we got some hail here, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah, my studio and my ranch is out in East County, San Diego, and it's high enough that we just got just plowed with snow last night. So we're all very excited about it. I can do some sledding and skiing later on today.
Awesome. I kind of wanted to start off today and talk to you about one of your projects, Captain Fantastic and the Magic Piano. If you could kind of go into that for the folks watching and let them know what that is.
Absolutely. Captain Fantastic and the Magic Piano is what we would like to consider the greatest Elton John fan film ever made. Not to boast. It's a project that was 20 something years in the works.
Wow.
We thought about it for a very long time before we pulled the trigger and went into production on it. It's a non-profit, non-monetized fan film made by fans for fans.
Okay. And can you tell them a little bit about how it came to be and kind of what the process was? And I'm guessing people sent in concert footage, or you yourself went to concerts. So what was kind of a little bit of behind the scenes on that?
The origins of this film go all the way back to my early film school days, kind of right after high school era. And my film crew and I, we were a tight-knit a group of artists. We were making films. And at the same time, it just so happened, as fate would have it, that Elton John was playing concerts here and there in town in San Diego. And we started going to these concerts. There was a couple of members on our crew that were major Elton John fans, sort of got the rest of us hyped up. And after a few years of this, just Elton John music sort of became like the soundtrack to our lives. And a lot of our films just sort of had inside jokes about Elton John music. And of course, Bernie Taupin's lyrics are very poetic, very artistic. And at one point, one of the members on our crew, his name was Alan Murati, he had just sort of thrown out there, like, what if we did like a psychedelic Elton John fantasy film, and really brought the lyrics to life, really brought the visuals to life, not just necessarily a concert, but something more than that. And that idea stewed for about 20 years. The crew and I just, thought about it and thought about it. And Alan Murati, this member of my crew, he was going to play this part. This originally was his vision. He was going to play this part. He was going to go the whole nine yards. But as circumstances happened, he just wasn't available to play this part. No one else on the crew really was up to the challenge. I, being so familiar with the project and the idea and having thought about it for 20 years, decided to just take it upon myself to play the main role. One of the major holdbacks on this film was the design and the construction of the prop, the central piece to the whole film, the magic piano. And admittedly, I had the vision in my head of what I wanted it to look like, what I wanted it to do, how I wanted it to perform, but I just wasn't sure exactly how to do it. Technology eventually caught up to a place where it's like, wow, okay, I can build LEDs, I can build a sound system, I can build a Bluetooth system, I can build the housing. I got all the pieces there, and I started building the piano. And all in all, it took about 8 months to build the piano and the Magic Collection that went along with it.
Very cool. I'll test your metal here and see if I can pull this out of you. I guess of all the Elton John music you've heard over the last you just in your life in general, not just the project. Do you have a favorite Elton John song that is not like one of the well-known big hits from the 70s or 80s? Is there a song in particular that it's kind of got meaning to you that when you hear it, you go, hey, this is not on a greatest hits or something, but this is something that means something to me?
Yeah, there's been a lot of music like that because, of course, like everyone else, you start off becoming a fan and you listen to all the great hits. And once you sort of absorbed all of those, then you move into the outer realms, right? You move into those more obscure albums. I think more recently I've discovered the Blue Moves album, which to me blew my mind, because having listened to virtually every other album in existence, I had always sort of passed over Blue Moves, and I would argue that any track on that album is spectacular. If you're talking more of a mainstream album, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, which was, one of Elton's, if not the most popular album, has a few tracks on there. Scarecrow comes to mind right away. Tracks that you normally might pass over to get to those fantastic hits. But, some of these slower ballads with the very melodic lyrics by Bernie Taupin, and the way that Elton and Bernie just meld this together, it's just pure art. But admittedly, I had to almost mature as a musician, as a music listener, to really appreciate some of these other more obscure pieces.
Oh, I feel you. I think me personally, the one that kind of I think it was in the late '90s, it kind of jumped out at me, to where I was, because he kind of got into that phase where he was doing a lot of soundtrack stuff. I know he did like The Lion King, and he did a lot of stuff for Broadway, but um I just remember the music video for I Want Love, that had Robert Downey Jr. in it. I think Downey had just come out of rehab, and it's just like a really simple, haunting piano ballad, but I think the nakedness of the music and knowing like what Downey had gone through was like kind of like the perfect marriage. And for whatever reason, like I said, it's not one of the ones you hear on the radio constantly, but it just, I don't know, it just really caught my imagination. So what has been, I'm going to follow up that with, what has been kind of the reaction for that from not just Elton John fans, but just the festivals, and what are you hearing back from it?
When I made the film, I knew it was a good movie. It was fun. But honestly, I hadn't even intended on, putting it into any festivals. I had to find festivals that sort of specialized in fan films and, things like that. But it was surprisingly a wonderful reaction. Everybody that watches the film, even people that aren't fans of Elton John, have enjoyed the film. And like I said, we tried to, make the film more than just a common music video, more than just a stage performance. We wanted the film, albeit it's a short film, to be an
Mhm.
experience. And, I think people got it. Once they watch it, they start having a really good time. So I would say it's been overwhelmingly positive.
Excellent, excellent. And I'll move on from that because I know we've got a little bit of stuff to cover here, but I at least wanted to talk about one of your other projects before we get into the meat and potatoes of you as a person, is Meet My Pet Monster. And I know that's been kind of tearing it up on the film festival circuit. So I kind of wanted to get into that. And that seems like a pretty fun project. And I guess just let everybody know kind of what the gist of it is, and kind of where it came from and how it developed.
Sure. So our film Meet My Pet Monster is based on an 80s franchise called My Pet Monster. Like Magic Piano, this is also a fan film, and deliberately attempting to be the best fan film ever made to date. The origins of it was, I was a child of the 80s. I grew up watching the Saturday morning cartoon. I grew up watching the live action film. I loved it all. I loved the comic books. I loved the stories. And, but then, the 80s ended, and sort of My Pet Monster had faded away with the 80s. And as an artist and as a filmmaker, even as a little kid, I always thought to myself, like, the franchise never really got its chance. The monster really never got to live up to its full potential. And had I ever grown up to become a filmmaker, it would have been a lifelong dream to make the My Pet Monster film. Well, fast forward a few years later, I'm a filmmaker. I'm making, fan films. I'm making all original projects. And I looked around and I started realizing that all of my favorite franchises and movies from the 80s and the 90s were suddenly being exploited and remade and relaunched, and they were all terrible. And it sort of broke my heart, because just like
Yeah.
everyone else, we wanted to see what happens to Indiana Jones, what happens to the Ghostbusters, right? And we we just got terrible movies. And, I sort of looked around and I was like, somehow all of my favorite franchises were hijacked and ruined, but somehow they had overlooked My Pet Monster from the 80s. Maybe it just wasn't big enough or popular enough to get ruined yet. And that's when I decided just to take matters into my own hands. I knew I couldn't make, this wasn't a financial project. This wasn't monetized in any way. Again, this was just fan art made by fans for fans. But I wanted to give the My Pet Monster community that surprisingly is still alive and well out there the movie that they always really wanted to see, like how does this all really connect into sort of a My Pet Monster universe? And so that's really how this started. I just decided I was going to just go rogue and make the movie that I wanted to see, throw it up on the internet for the fans, and just let the community decide.
Well, that's interesting. That brings up another question too, because it's kind of something that I've been through too, which you make something and then you put it online, and then friends or family or whoever says like, you should really think about taking this offline and submit it to festivals, or just, go through Vimeo, or just have a private link or something. So what was the process like for that, when it's like you started to get the reaction and you're going, oh, wait, I'm kind of onto something, like, ooh, I should take the YouTube link down? And was there an experience that you had like that?
Kind of once the film was finished, we knew it was a fantastic movie. We knew that even as a B grade horror movie, that in another world it could absolutely, go mainstream. It could absolutely be monetized, and it could go all the way. But it really wasn't designed for that. It wasn't designed to make money. It was designed just fan art for fans. There is a certain part of like, wow, now that everybody loves it, and that, the fan films festivals love the film, that, wow, we really wish we could go to the next level. But that's not really what this was about. This was art for the sake of art. This was my gift to the fans. And at best, we're going to get started on the sequels pretty soon. But again, it just really wasn't designed for any of that. We have other projects that are all original projects that are designed for commercial release and whatnot. And so, we kind of put the commercial public release stuff, focus on those films.
But I also think, and I'll just rewind here a couple of years, we don't want to keep reliving this part of our lives, but like, during lockdown and everything like that, I feel like that was really a time that people just said, well, hell, if I'm ever going to get around to these projects that I don't know if I'm ever going to finish or see the light of day or start, that was the time to do it, especially with short films. So I guess just take me back during that time, maybe 2, 3 years ago. Was that the time when you kind of had no choice, and it was like, okay, I can't go to outside sources for help or go on location or do anything like that? Is that kind of what you focused on during that time about 2.5, 3 years ago?
The reality of it was that it takes me years to launch any one of my projects. And so we were well into My Pet Monster and the Electric Cycle Racing League, Captain Fantastic, the Magic Piano. We had all these projects pretty much going simultaneously years before the pandemic hit. By the pandemic hit, we were more or less in the post-production stage. And so we weren't as dramatically affected by all the restrictions and whatnot, as a normal company out in the world that is hiring people and having sort of a revolving door mentality. One of the things that is very useful is that my production company and my crew, more or less, were an ensemble group of artists and filmmakers. Some of these people have been working with me for virtually our entire lives. And so we have the benefit of, sort of an available base crew that's always there to work on the productions and keep things going. So again, during the pandemic, it would have been really problematic had we have to go out and, hold auditions and, find different people to do these different parts. But, we more or less had everybody in house. So the pandemic slowed us down a little bit, but just by the nature of the way we work and our company, we kind of just rode through it. Not to say that not minimize the pandemic at all. It was very terrible. We lost people. I lost people. It was absolutely terrible time. But strictly business wise, production wise speaking, we were able to manage our way through it, pretty conveniently.
That's cool. I guess we were just talking about the 80s here. So let's hop in the Wayback Machine and let's go back. Let's say so you're talking about these influences and things that you went through and we all did the thing where we got the action figures for our favorite, shows and movies and played pretend and everything. But at a certain point, you're getting older, you're becoming a teenager. Do you remember if there was a time or a situation where you saw something like a show or a movie, um, and you said to a friend or maybe a buddy or group of friends like, "Hey, let's see if we can find some stuff or go to a yard sale or get a camera and let's just see if we can make something." Do you remember those kind of early first footsteps?
Well, my journey is a little bit different. It's what I like to call a very organic journey. I started making movies in the backyard at like 6 years old. I confiscated the family video camera, started wrangling in and recruiting the neighborhood kids. Some of those kids that made movies in the backyard with me back then still work with me to this day. And we just sort of kept making movies. It was just something that just happened very naturally. And so by the time I hit high school, we already had a dozen or more feature-length films, original stories, costumes, the works. We were pretty well, skilled and rehearsed at what we were doing. So there really never was this moment of like, aha, I'm going to be this movie maker. I was sort of already just doing it. There was a moment of self-realization where I had to make a choice. And, I would say it was around the summer after my junior year in high school. I was blown away by this documentary film called Trinity and Beyond, narrated by William Shatner, with just an amazing musical score by William Stromberg. And the movie blew my mind. And really all it was just, music set to restored atomic test bomb footage. And it sort of takes you through the different decades and eras. But that movie really inspired me to start thinking about a film that later was called Beyond Nargidia. And at the time, this was my magnum opus. Ended up taking me 4 years to make this movie. I put all in, full guerrilla, exactly like you were saying. I was going out and recruiting nobodies. I was finding random locations. I was going to auto part dealerships and digging car parts out of the garbage so I could build, my futuristic machines. And, that was a pretty significant film for myself and for my career. But I was in pre-production for that movie for a year. And by the time my senior year in high school came along, I was also very proficient in theater and stage plays. And I was finally offered the big coveted role for the big lead play our senior year. It's kind of what everyone hopes for in their high school drama career. Turned out that the first rehearsal day landed on the first day of principal photography for my film. And I knew these two worlds just weren't going to work. I couldn't live both lives. I had to make a decision. And so I walked out of the rehearsal to the surprise of everyone. And I said, fuck it, I'm going to go make my movie. And I did. And I never looked back.
That's great. I mean, that's tough when it's like you've literally been gifted something that you've coveted, your whole life. And then it's like, well, my heart's just not in it. I mean, that's got to be simultaneous low point and also I would think kind of like a kick in the pants kind of saying like, well, now I know, you know what I mean? Like to go along that path and then it's like you almost had to just take it away from yourself so you could just laser focus on what you wanted to get into. Um, so let's
Absolutely true.
move forward a few years and let's say so you finish a project, you get it out. Do you remember the first time either you got a reaction or you were actually able to kind of sit in a crowd and hear a reaction to one of your films? Do you remember the first time that kind of happened?
As a matter of fact, vividly I do. And that would be premiere of the film I was talking about previously, Beyond Nargidia. This was in 2001. We had a live premiere at Paradise Point Resort in San Diego, California. Fancy place. We had a massive ballroom, had about 100 people in attendance. And at that point in time, I'd never really screened my film for anyone. I had never screened any of my films besides friends and family and, clubs I was in at school and things like that. So this was sort of like the real deal. And, I always enjoy to sit in the back during premieres of my films, which is weird. I know the director and everyone is supposed to sit in the front row, and but I don't. If I get away with it, I prefer to sit in the back, and I like watching the audience and seeing how they react. And the film was not what anyone expected. I think most people were blown away that I even finished a movie, but yet that the movie was actually pretty good. It was, the special effects and everything, especially for that era was well enough that the audience, standing ovation, everyone was very happy. And that was the first great moment because, all right, this isn't just friends and family, this is strangers as well, and professionals and other industry people. And and so yeah, that was a pretty fantastic moment, definitely.
And people always talk about this where if you can ever sneak anonymously into the back of the theater to watch something and not have anyone know that you're there so you can gauge it purely on their reaction alone and not be distracted by your presence there as the filmmaker, that's just got to be what the ultimate reward. I mean, this is literally who you're making it for, or just the general public to just see this, get out of it what they will, and then you're going to get unfiltered feedback. So that had to be a special night for you.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you were just kind of like, ah. Not just a
It's so much
relaxation,
work.
kind of, yeah, the work, but also just, they get it, they like it. I'm here. This is what it's about, like the give and take with the audience. So I guess jump ahead here to the last few years and um what point did you feel like your support network, your friends, your family, that you could kind of maybe do this full time? It's none of my business if you have a day job. I know I have a day job, but just where you could make that shift and like, this is what I do. This is only what I do. Obviously, friends and family, but do you remember that time or mentally you made that switch? I mean, because I think you were talking about, you had to have a film come out and get the reaction for it and go like, well, if it doesn't go well, I'm screwed, or what do I do? Do I take up welding? What the hell? So I guess take me through kind of like what you were going through mentally and where you moved on from there.
Well, at the same time that this previous story we were just talking about was happening, I had to make the choice if I was going to take the lead role in the play, if I was going to go into production on my film. At the same time, I had to start making some career decisions as well. What really am I going to do? What's going to pay the bills? And I knew I wasn't the super academic type, and I finally had to come to the decision where, okay, I'm not going to be able to go to some big fancy film school and get a big fancy degree, go to work for a production house. I knew I couldn't go that route, so I decided, okay, instead of spending all the money to do that and pursuing that, I was gonna just get a couple of humble certifications. And I got certifications: legal video, digital video, multimedia. Sort of a plethora of technology based educational perspectives. And then I started my production company, JS Company Productions, and that has essentially served as my basis. So during the day, I do commercial production, I do consulting, I do, a whole plethora of professional, projects and things like that. And that has always supported sort of the infrastructure so that I can be, the artist, mad scientist by night, and that's why, really these two things have always gone hand in hand. My production company by day, sort of working the art by night. And, that construct hasn't changed to this day.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So you've obviously worked in a wide variety of projects, a wide variety of genres. Is there any kind of genre that you've always wanted to either tackle or chase after or work on a project for that you haven't that you want to, that it's be either in the offing for you or it's just down the line thinking, you know?
You know, I don't particularly have a project that's like, wow, if I had $1 million, okay, this is what I would make. I think more about projects and storylines that I had already started that I would love to finish. You know, going back to my early career, films like Beyond Orgidia in 2001 or Mountain Survival 2004, or even The Adventures in Ultra Suburbia, which was in 2003. Those films were all designed at least to be trilogies. They were designed to be these ongoing stories, and they were set up that way. And you know, for any other reason that I just haven't had the time, I've been busy working on these other projects, I haven't had the time to come back to these films. But I would love to, in my later years as a filmmaker, go back to these films, maybe with a bigger budget, you know, a little bit more knowledge and experience, and finish these stories. And you know, so that's probably what's on my mind most of the time when I think about, you know,
Okay.
what I'd like to do.
Have you, I'm assuming this is going to be a yes answer, but I really don't know. Have you been kind of, you know, we all have creative friends. Have you been roped in on other friends' projects and things like that where maybe they're just saying like, you know, work a day on this or a couple days on that. And the next thing you know, they're going like, James, help me. Oh my God, I can't figure this out.
Man, that used to happen all the time. Admittedly, that was mostly during sort of my film school era. You know, it doesn't really happen anymore. Maybe I've just gotten smarter. You know, back in the old days, it was like, well, your friends are your friends, and you're calling in favors, and they're calling in favors, and so you know you got to go where you're needed. But it got tiring very quickly because I'm the kind of person that I'm always working on my projects. I think everything through. I don't get into these situations where I have to call in somebody to come and rescue me per se, because there is nobody that can come in and rescue me. So you know, it's all on me. I have to finish it. You know, so depending on what it is, if it's something that I really like, I'm very interested in, I will absolutely contribute any way that I can. But I don't take just anybody that walks in the door, because as most filmmakers eventually learn, everybody on the planet is a filmmaker, right? Everybody has a screenplay in their head. You know, I every person I meet that finds out what I do and what I'm all about, the next question is, hey man, I got this amazing story, you should make it into a film. And that's fine. I guess there's probably filmmakers out there that don't have their own stories to tell and just are sitting around waiting for, you know, the water cooler man's genius $1 million Oscar winner idea,
Yeah.
you know. And so, you know, but I don't have that kind of time. I have so many stories that I'm trying to tell, so many films I'm trying to get produced, and everything is all happening at the same time that, you know, it's got to be something that really catches my attention, to let me step out of my world and, you know, come help. But it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. It definitely does happen.
Um, so I am kind of curious about this because I love talking to filmmakers and hearing about past experiences. So was there, and I'm sure it happened or has happened to you several times because it's happened to me, where even just as a writer or just as an actor on a project, but you're on a, let's say you're on a location, it's late at night, everybody's exhausted, they've been there all day, you're battling, you know, whatever terrain you're on, the elements, because it most of this time happens on location, and then something doesn't work right, or something breaks or you know god forbid there's an accident or you know somebody gets hurt or whatever. Do you remember any specific incidents where you know, let's say you're doing like a fight scene or something with choreography and it didn't work and then you had to just improvise something on the spot and then what you were able to come up with on the day actually looked more organic and came out better than you thought it would the way you wrote it?
You know, as an independent underground guerrilla filmmaker, pretty much that's how all my sets work all the time. You have to be able to roll with the punches, for lack of a better word. You know, and you can't be a diva on set. Yeah, sometimes story wise, it's very important that things work out the way they are, but sometimes you have to just go with the way you know, it works out. You know, if something breaks down or something isn't there, I've never had the luxury of multi-million dollar budgets to be able to come back the next day. A lot of times, if I'm there, that's it. That's all I got. One particular incident that comes to my mind is that most of my films are action films. They're for lack of a better word, action adventure movies, and I never really had the resources of the personnel to have a vast cast or crew. So just out of necessity, I've always acted in my own films. So therefore, I had to become a stuntman, on a poor man's budget, acting in my own films. I did a film back in 2004 called Mountain Survival, and it was all real stunts through the whole movie. I didn't have crash pads, I didn't have wires. Everything was very real, hanging off cliffs, jumping into waterfalls, things like that. Now, I'm very safe on my films when it comes to everybody else. I've, thank God, never had any type of accidents or injuries when it comes to my other actors or my sets, or my crew. But when it comes to me and I'm in my own films and I'm pushing the limit, doing these stunts, Jackie Chan style, inevitably just shit's going to happen. It's just the way it
Oh,
is, especially when you make movies as frequently as I do. So you get banged up. Things happen. I've suffered some pretty serious injuries over the years. In this particular film, Mountain Survival in 2004, I had spent 6 months shooting this movie, and I had done some of the craziest stunts I've ever done in my entire life, then or now. And we're at the end of this 6 month shoot. It's literally our last day of production. We're way up in the mountains on the edge of a cliff shooting these scenes. I'm doing a very simple stunt. I'm just dropping from one ledge to another. It's only, maybe about 6 to 7 feet. And man, I landed wrong and wrenched my arm back and basically dislocated and tore my rotator cuff and just completely just destroyed my arm. And, it was pretty bad. Luckily for me, a lot of guys on my crew are EMTs, and they were, medical professionals in some way, shape, or form. And so, they were sort of able to pull me out of it, relocate my arm, like keep me awake. And I knew there was just the movie was shot. The next day, my actors were flying out. I was not being able to come back to this location. I had to finish shooting this movie. So I did. I rolled with it. And instead of this whole drug out fight scene that was supposed to happen, we essentially have the bad guy stab me in the arm. And that explains my, limp, destroyed arm. And I finished the film, but I'll admit that I think it does make the film much more realistic and much more dramatic, because I can't even watch some of those scenes to this day. It just makes me cringe. It was one of the worst, most painful things I've ever gone through. But you watch
but
that
you did
film,
it. You
that's
finished
real.
it. It's a testament to you to do that. Because I mean, I'm not going to rag too much on younger people, but I hear like harrowing, amazing stuff like that, and then I hear about the Coffee Bean or the Starbucks, some baristas like, well, Shelly had to go home. She banged her funny bone, and she kind of got a headache, so she couldn't finish the day. I'm like, I just think about, me being like 16, 17, working at my first grocery store or something. If I would have presented that crap to my manager, he'd have been like, uh-huh. Oh, are you puking? Are you bleeding? Get back over there. you know?
It's really so true. It's weird how the mentality these days has gone the opposite way. It's like in the old days, people almost used to take pride. It's like, oh, this ain't nothing. Like, yeah, I've been thrown up all afternoon. Let me get back to work. Maybe just we're all a lot more comfortable now, and it's a lot easier to be
I mean, I'm not gonna dog on it. Like I
self-absorbed.
said,
But
it's just the fun of getting but,
yeah.
so as we're down to the last few minutes here, well, let's say what's next for you guys? What's coming up around the corner?
Probably the next thing that people are going to see from the production company is a project that, like my other films, I've been working on for several years now. It's going to be a novel slash film project, sort of a modern day noir. The film is, and the novel is going to be titled Where the Dragons Sleep. And it's sort of a pseudo autobiography of the crew and I, and a collection of stories as we attempt to make our underground guerrilla films against sort of a dark, dystopian LA backdrop.
Oh, awesome, awesome. And I guess last question here is well, second to last one, I guess, is with all of the things that we have at our disposal today, I personally feel like, because I've shot stuff on a phone just because I didn't have a camera, and it was like I wanted to get, I knew I had a window of time, and friends able to just do something on a weekend. So I don't feel like there's any excuse for people not to make films or shorts or little things for YouTube. So what kind of Cliff Notes advice would you give to kind of aspiring, teenagers out there looking to make their first short?
If you have an idea for a film, a short or whatever, just go for it. Don't get hung up on technology. Don't get hung up on frame rates. You can find a way to make anything work. I always am so blown away because people always ask me, like, oh, is it hard to make movies? Well, these days, no. You can technically make a movie on your iPhone. Is it hard to make good movies? Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But the technology that's available to the average person these days, there really is no excuse not to tell a story. And your story could be anything. It could be about your crummy job. It could be about your sick grandma, getting chemotherapy. It could be, the fantasy you've been playing around in your head for years. It's, with the technology that's available today, there is no excuse. And anybody that gets all caught up with, well, I have to be able to shoot with this camera and I have to have this and then, like those are all just excuses. If you're an artist and you've got a story to tell, just do it, put it together. The average person isn't going to criticize you. The average person is going to be like, damn, they did something cool.
There's something
That's
cool,
great. They
just
brought
an
something.
iPhone and a computer and a bunch of people with free time.
Yeah. And there's so many people out there that want to make movies too. It's like you don't have to have a Hollywood cast for this. It's.
No, anymore. I don't even feel like, I live in Fullerton, and I don't feel like now. I mean, I moved out here 20 years ago to make movies, and it's allegedly sort of happening now, but I don't feel like you don't need to do that now. You could just be in small town USA, and if you've got a phone and access to the internet, you're pretty much way ahead of anybody 20, 25 years ago. I wanted to kind of give you a minute here to kind of just go through where people can find not only your work, but how they could reach out to you, and I'll let you take it from there.
Right on. Well, really the best way to follow all of our work is to go to the central hub, the JS Company Productions website. It's www.jscompanyproductions.com. There you're going to find trailers, release posters, behind the scenes photos, behind the scenes story, exclusive stuff you're not going to see anywhere else. And from there, that's the central hub. You can check out all the other social media links and websites and things like that. But that's always the best place to start, is the company
Excellent.
website.
We will funnel everybody there and put that in the credits. But man, I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the show. We've been trying to make this work for a while, and nothing but the best for you, because your projects are great. They're really speaking to people. You're coming across. You're scoring out there in the film festivals, so you're getting it done. And man, just enjoy the rest of your weekend. And thanks again for being on the show.
It's been more than a pleasure, Mr. Lawson. Hopefully we get to do this again. Thank you.
No problem. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.